The Logitech G923 racing wheel is always one of the first wheels I recommend to sim racers who are looking to try sim racing or F124 for the first time. It's an excellent, affordable wheel that works with almost every racing game on every console platform. In this video, I'm going to run through my recommended Logitech G923 settings for F124. I've changed a few things away from default to try and give more of a sensation of force feedback and just better control overall with the G923. These settings can also be used with the G29 or 920, but maybe you'd have to boost the vibrational force feedback ever so slightly to kind of compensate for the lack of true force. Talking of true force, in F124 there is an option for it, and just make sure that's set to 100%. Then go ahead and head over to the calibration settings. There are a few things in this menu which I would adjust, but to be fair, most of it I'll leave at 0. When you're racing with a controller, there are a lot of things in the calibration menu which I would change, and this is just to make the handling feel a little bit more realistic. But when you're racing with a wheel, keeping most things set at 0 will give you true one-to-one steering in the game. There are a couple of things I'd change, and they're mainly to do with the brake. Now, I would always set a very small brake dead zone, say 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 or 5%. And this is to stop the brake from registering any input by accident, as this could cause your DRS to shut on a straight. Then the brake pedal on a G923 is rather stiff, so it may be a case that you can't actually reach 100% input. If this is the case, start increasing your brake saturation a little bit. This is kind of like an outside dead zone setting, and the more you increase this, the easier it will be to reach 100% brake input in game. You can add sort of 10%, maybe even up to 20 if you find the brake pedal really stiff. After making any adjustments, you can perform a button test, and this will show you on screen kind of how much actual in-game input is being registered. With those settings changed, I'll then go ahead and look at the vibration and force feedback settings. Now, first of all, make sure it's turned on, then set the strength up to 120. Now, this is a bit higher than I ran with the G923 last year, but there are some issues of just the force feedback not feeling strong enough this time around. Setting it to 120 will just allow some more of those forces to come through. And the same applies to the on-track effects. Setting this pretty high at 75 will kind of just emphasize the bumps and the change in track surface, which is nice to feel in your wheel. If you find your wheel is vibrating too much when you're traveling down a straight, or it's kind of gyrating from side to side, try lowering this down. Then with the rumble strip and the off-track effects, these are kind of less important, but they're more of an immersive thing. I'd set the rumble strip to 30 and off-track effects to 20. Now, you don't want these too high, otherwise every time you go over a curb, your wheel will just start to shake itself silly. The pit stop effects are new this year. Set this to whatever you fancy. Leaving it at 50 for me felt just right. And then changing the wheel damper to 20 kind of adds some artificial weight to the wheel, which the Logitech can be lacking in sometimes. Finally, the wheel rotation. This is a hotly debated topic this time around. By default, this will be set to 400 degrees as the new handling and suspension model have changed kind of the steering rack of the car. I still find lowering this down to 370 makes the wheel a little bit more responsive, a little bit more kind of on point, so when you turn, it will turn a little bit faster. But again, this is kind of personal preference. If you find that the wheel is feeling a bit too twitchy, start increasing this back up to 400 degrees, although you will need to put a little bit more steering in to make a corner. Now, it's worth noting that new handling model, because by default or with a time trial setup, these cars feel incredibly twitchy, incredibly kind of overly responsive, and not in a good way. I would really recommend trying a more optimized race setup, similar to the setups that we're dropping on our YouTube channel. These race setups that we're designing are designed to create a stable car, one that feels much more like it did in F123 and kind of removes that twitchiness from the handling. So where you can, try and pair these Logitech settings with a race setup, whether that's ours or somebody else's, because it will make the world of difference. Finally, if you're racing on a PC, make sure you have G-Hub installed, you have the firmware updated, and make sure G-Hub is running in the background. But in terms of settings, I'd keep everything pretty much at default. Keep the operating range high, the sensitivity and the centering spring sort of at 50, and set the torque to 100 and the audio effects to around 80, and things will feel just fine. Now, before I end this video, there is currently a lot of problems going around with the Logitech wheel in F124 and it just not working. This is a known issue and only happens on some versions of F1 24, and it's kind of pot luck whether you're going to have this issue or not. If you do experience an issue, you may find that you have no force feedback at all, or sometimes your wheel's not even recognised in game. I have had this happen to me once during my time with the G923, and I fixed it by running a complete power cycle through the wheel, which it can be done by simply disconnecting the power or switching the wheel off at the wall outlet. Doing this while also ensuring that I had G-Hub running before I started F1 24 or turned on my wheel fixed this issue for me. Hopefully EA Sports will address this soon, as there always seems to be some issue at launch with a certain wheel. It happened last year and the year before, and it seems to be happening again this year, and this time it's affecting the G923. But let me know in the comments below whether you've got your G923 working, whether you feel these settings work well or better than the default settings, and whether you're enjoying F1 24. As I mentioned before, go ahead and check out our race setups because they are kind of one of the biggest things you can do to make the handling model much better in this year's game. If you've enjoyed this video and like these settings, please give the video a like as it will just really help this video get seen by others. But for now guys, I will see you on track.